I said I started out saying a brother from another mother, but saying that absolutely sincerely because you know how you meet those people and you feel like you know them already. Well, I never actually met Mike in person, but I feel like I know Mike already. He's got
Kindred spirits, kindred spirits.
Yeah, he's kind of got like that energy that it's just hard not to embrace it, man. And I told Mike, I was like, Mike, you're one of the first people who I started watching online doing Tai Chi. And it was quite impressive because I never seen any black people doing Tai Chi. So that kind of like caught me.
Oh, interesting.
I always thought about Chinese people doing Tai Chi.
Okay.
And then I started finding out Mike's background, and I simply gonna go ahead and admit he's built like no other. You know,
Wow.
Mike has a background of a Tai Chi Ren and a true Tai Chi fighter. When I say a true Tai Chi fighter, I mean a person that basically has Tai Chi as their foundation and has actually been in the sports side. And I'm sure he's probably had to tangle a few times when he didn't want to as well, and
A few.
he's got some authentic experience to share. And he does that in such a humbling way. He's not getting enough shout outs. So I said, let's get Brother Mike in here and let's see what we can do to like edify this brother, because he's got the skill, man. And if you don't know Brother Mike, look him up
Yeah.
online because he's one of those ninjas out there, those Tai Chi ninjas. And Brother Mike, introducing my sister Pam from Forever Tai Chi. We're family here, her and Dan from Gator Tai Chi.
Yes.
We've been doing it online for quite a while. We met in person, and we're just embracing people such as yourself, who we see as being authentically pure in whatever you do. So thank you for being here, my brother. No
Oh,
further.
thank y'all. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I didn't realize that I see us all as peers, so I just thought we were going to be connecting as peers as well. So
We are, we are, we are.
yeah. Yeah, but no, I graciously thank you for the opportunity to to engage with you guys, and converse about something that we all are passionate about, from our own experiences and engagement with the art and things. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk to you guys with it as well.
Right. I'm going to ask one question right off the cut because it came to me, and it's about Tai Chi in general. Not about you, but it may be your idea, of course. So, Mike, this is for you. Oftentimes in Tai Chi, they talk about having our shoulders squared over our hips, right? I don't know if you found that to be true or not in your teaching, but I find it to be true in mine, and I see it represented in a lot of other art forms.
Sure,
Now, from a martial arts self-defense standpoint, some people would say that that is disadvantageous because you make yourself a bigger target. Uh,
sure.
so if you look at boxing, they kind of they blade it.
Yeah.
So from your experience, which is deep and profound, and also how was your specific stance in regards to that?
So the stances are traditional for me in regards to my practice, both being a Yang style was my primary style from the Yang Ching Fu, I guess if you want to call it that line, being the more relative, and I don't want to say directly from his teaching because it was through his son Yang Chung. That line of the tutelage is what's the Yang style that I represented and I learned. And so even in that, there's a slight more lean to the stance and the posture and that traditional form. But again, the hips were square, relatively speaking. Depending on obviously most postures, but there are some. Maybe like in single whip, it's not so square. And things like that. There explicitly has that shape of having to bring one shoulder back. But generally speaking, yeah. But that being said, um, I don't treat the form as being literal. I do treat it as being a foundational training, structural training, obviously giving you a perspective of the essence of what's being visualized through the form, right? So you're working through that, and then the primary thing I think, aside from those parts, are being you're conditioning your body to be strong from foot to head, right? And so there's a certain alignment that facilitates that, and so by, if you look at even a person who does karate and it's a little bit more square, there's strength in that, right? But and this definitely from my own perspective too as well, but it's also from the folks I've learned from, is that once you have that, it's like going to school or studying any other discipline, right? You learn the principles. Then every artist, once they go out and start designing their work, is going to look different, but yet they're following the same principles of artistry, I guess, if you will, right? The same
Mhm.
foundational aspects that need to be shared on perspective, on depth and on shading and things of that nature, right? So you have all that to take in consideration when you're looking at a form, and it's particularly important to understand about body structure and in relationship to differences, right? I'm a 5'7", about 165 pounder person, right? I can't be expected to do what someone who maybe is 6'2", with my attributes. They vary so differently across the board, right? And then you got to take in consideration each person's physical attributes through nature or even through injury sometimes, right? The limitations. So sometimes limitation creates great results, because
Mhm.
then you have to adapt a certain way. So generally speaking, most of us do have to adapt a certain way because our body mechanics are not necessarily aligned with the next person, even our teachers or even our classmates, right? So
Right.
having a square structure, I think, overall and principle creates this, like I said, from the floor to the head, structure and dynamics that you follow through the whole sequence of your practice. So if you're doing that, your body's getting acclimated, your muscles are getting acclimated, your mind is also getting acclimated to how to be strong in a position. Because typically when we're moving and we're adding any action to our movement, we're moving from the center. So therefore, it doesn't stay square. We're not just moving our arms. There's always a center movement, right? Maybe you're landing. I call it maybe like the power shots, beginning of a power shot. I'm doing white crane prison. Bang, it's right there, right? It's the power shot. And when I go across blame, when I'm coming back into that power position, right? It's like a power shot. But anywhere on that line, I may catch myself right here where I'm not all the way through, and I can choose to push or pull depending on what the necessary for that action with that same body structure, because my body has now already been conditioned that, hey, this is the way you should be supported. So I hope I didn't go too long or too wild
No,
of
no,
a tangent on that, but that's my perspective for that.
no. That was great right there. Thank you for breaking that down, man. I like that. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Okay.
I like it.
So a follow-up to that, I mean, the shoulders in alignment with the hips, you have the other parts of the six harmonies. Does that
Correct.
also contribute to um your observation as
Of
far
course it does,
as
because I the body is a whole and the body's also in pieces, right? Because in theory, you use the body as a unit, right? But there are certain times you have to disconnect that unit so you don't fall prey to anything, right? So when is that necessary? You may want to use this elbow here, but let this elbow relax so you can, or you may want to have it combine and squeeze in, right? You have your harmonies, but you're still breaking things apart, right? And sometimes you might not need this other elbow. You may need the hip instead. So, but then again, this is what I was missing in the other statement. For me, the way I practice, it doesn't matter to me where my body is caught, because I'm going back to the core element of unity in action, right? So if my hand is stuck here, if I'm expecting my hand to get here, but something catches my hand back here, even from behind me, right? My intent is to go this way. I want to go that way with the same principles of using my body to let my, sinking down into my root and letting that follow through. Now my focus may, if I want to say that energy on my hand, it may not go down to here, where somebody maybe have their fingers right in there trying to pull me back, if you will. Now sinking into it and like maybe dragging them forward type thing, right? So in saying that, I'm paying attention to my six harmonies, but I think at times you really have to have that mindset of really working in yin and yang and the concept of fullness and like our completion and broken pieces, right? And you have to know when to say, I'm going to use my whole to take this broken piece and do what I need to do with it, right? So they may seem like they're disconnected in a way, but they really aren't. And that's sometimes the beauty of the mind being creative with the principles, or not even being creative. It's really maximizing on the principles. Even like you mentioned, and the six harmonies. Like when you have to move your hip. Say we're talking about staying square initially, right? But if I turn my hip and let go on the ball of my back foot, if you will, right, and I pivot my hip so that my knee can go towards my center or towards my left side as I'm pointing to right now, right? So, and doing that particular action, right? I have so many options of where I can implement something, whether it's on my hip, my torso, my shoulder, my hands, so forth and so on, right? But at the same time, I know I have to be aware that my whole body has to be grounded for any of that to be applicable, all right, or functional, or even to have any substance to it. You know what I mean? So, uh, so that you understanding the whole and the separate is how I view it, going back to your question and also tying it back into about the shoulders being square. So
Yeah. One thing too here, man. One thing that I noticed about you when I was watching a couple of your matches, you look very loose. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And that just attracted me. You know, most people like to square it up and stiff and hard,
Sure,
but
sure.
you didn't give that. And through your expression, I noticed how you could change and flow so seamlessly to me. You
Yeah.
know, and would you say that a lot of that is through the mindfulness of the practice, or how did you develop that quality?
So in essence, really, what really ties to that for me a lot is about confidence, and what I'm able to do and what I'm not able to do. So, it's a safe environment, pushing hands. I know I'm not going to really get injured. I don't have to be very super aggressive. However, the looseness comes from um, a turning point in my training where for about 3 years, my teacher would tell me, Jane, you look like a wooden man. God, we just have to loosen up. So, um, and a lot of that was, kind of tension that I brought along for on myself of being unsure. Being unsure is the position is right. Being unsure if I'm going to be in balance for my next movement. Being unsure about, is this the next move in the sequence? I'm still learning it, type stuff. And so, just like anything else, when you practice as such with that kind of like anxiety, I guess in your practice, if you're practicing on anxiety with anxiety, then you're going to have that anxiety. So what created a difference for that was gaining confidence through one, losing, I guess, if you want to say that, because losing, you're stiffen up. I have to loosen up. Stop. You're not going to do this, right? You're not gonna stay on my arms now. I got it. Yeah. Every time I get toe strong, I'm gonna shift about. And then the most phenomenal thing is, which I'll share with you guys, is I'm getting better. I'm getting an understanding of loosening up, have confidence. I'm winning some competitions. I'm going to meet with other folks and getting accolades like, oh man, you're pushing hands, getting really good, and training with other people and getting all this stuff built in. A classmate of mine had went to China to do almost like a walkabout. He went for like about 6 months where he said, well, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to walk around, go different places and see who people I can meet up that does Tai Chi, do push hands and so forth and so on, right? And so he ended up doing that. And I think he stayed there for roughly maybe about 6 months or so. And he came back with this videotape of this one guy he met in China. And I have it on my YouTube channel too as well. So it's posted up there. And this is one of another portion that my instructor has too as well. So he's doing pushing hands with him. We watched this little guy, because my classmate Adrian, probably about 5'11-ish, maybe 6'1" or something like that range. And at the time, maybe about 190, maybe 200 pounds, if around that range, if you will. But if you look on the video, there's a really small, little skinny guy that's doing all this stuff to him, moving him around, right? Not like blasting him away, but there's this it was beauty in the subtleness of the movements that he was doing and the reaction that he caused, because that's what became my method, and it's what you probably see from me now, right? Because it wasn't an amount of tension; it was like letting everything go, and then when they think it's all gone, there you are popping right back up, and it's like, whoa, hey, where's that come from? So I get a lot of that from people, because it's almost like I got to the point of being that rigid wooden kind of structure my instructor was teaching, to this very loose, free flowing kind of practitioner that, through his coaching and through him watching this video, we watched this video like over and over, like just standing in front of the VCR like this and rewinding it again. Hold on. Do you see what he did right there? Like, you catch that, the elbow right there. You see, like, really, and again, this is VHS days. So, it's just rewind this thing, rewind it, and it was to that level of detail. Then we would try it and we'll see it. And then we would try it on other people. It's like, oh, we got it that time, didn't get it that time. What did I do wrong? And so it was a study and understanding about this true exchange of yin and yang. Like, how can he, really empty himself out and then, create this? Then once I got it, the more I did it, the more, even more loose I became, the more, not even loose, the more aware I think I would say I became. That's more so the thing, is the awareness that was created of knowing where extremities are. In some videos, you probably can even see it when I'm doing it, where I know people are not. I'll have my eyes closed and just pushing that way. Now, I think that's a way of like, oh, that's how you do. You're a great master in that way. No, it's just my sensibilities are there, and I like to play on it that way. I like to feel like, oh, he's trying to get here. So when he gets there, I already know that this leads into me getting to his forearm right there. And then when he pulls back, I know this part of my hand can really sink right into this part of my hand can sink right back into his elbow as he's drawing back. Like, I'm all becoming like, I'm so aware of these things. Or if I can't get there because he's turning a certain way, I can scoop underneath, to catch underneath the elbow, So, it's so much that taught me by loosening up to be able to catch things or feel things or sense things. And now when I get engaged with folks, I have to be loose. Otherwise, I'm going to return back to the other portion of being a little bit more exposed or vulnerable.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Mike, it looked to me in some of your sparring videos, you like to work inside versus across or outside. Has that changed any, or is that,
No,
how do you feel?
say that again now. Repeat the first question.
You like to work inside, close?
Oh,
when you're sparring?
Yeah, it depends. Depends on what I'm playing with at the time. So I'll say this. I'll say this. I'm not a kicker. I don't kick very often, or very, kind of any kind of elusive type kicks. In my perspective, I guess, if you will, right? Some other folks think some of the things I do with them are tricky. So my arm range is kind of my range, and I know I can make myself long. I can do a lot of different things, but it really is just me playing around with different people, different statures, different energies. Some people are more aggressive, some people are more agile, some people move more, some people. So when I attack it, I just really want to go as much as I can to get into pushing hands range, and if I have to come back out, I'm okay with it, right? Because pushing hands range is going to lead me to so much more. I'm going to be able to strike, I'm going to be able to grapple, I'm going to be able to push away, I'm going to be able to control. So that's more of the range I want. Now, if I have to stay out there because someone else is a little bit more wiry, I'm going to play more so the up and down game, the in and out game, the angles game. You know what I mean? Which is, I see all that obviously in what we do, because as Lester mentioned, I study other things, but I don't practice other things. So I practice Tai Chi. So that footwork and all that angles and all that stuff comes from Dalu for me, right? That's how I learned it. That's how I was able to express it once I start practicing, in the sparring realm, if you will, taking those same things within the art and putting it, and I don't want to call it a modern spin on it, but it's an evolutionary spin on it, because I would say not only is Tai Chi an old art, but there were other arts back there as well. But then since then, those arts were developed, other things have come about that requires alterations to the way that you engage with things. Some of the same things that were experienced there and then are not were experienced. Experienced now weren't experienced then. They weren't even there. Even the exposure of the way people move their bodies in certain ways, right? So we have to take in consideration, true reality, right? Because we've seen it even probably in our time here on Earth, of how even within the bodies of people, how things have changed and altered. There's probably a lot more. Here's a very blunt example, right? If you go back to, we'll say even just the 90s, right? Just the 90s. There were far less MMA fighters than there are nowadays, right?
Mhm.
Would you say that? And now would you take that in consideration, this as a little small subset, if you want to call it that, within the martial arts world, right? That small little subset that was there to now is massive. Like, you can't go anywhere without seeing anybody with cauliflower ears, right? You know what I mean? Like, or a shirt that represents, some jujitsu arena. Back in those days, they didn't have that kind of following, I guess, if you will. Where I know for me, when I say that, I was like, before I got into practicing martial arts, it'd be like, oh, those karate guys over there, or those guys over there. Now it's like, it's so immersed into society, it's hard to kind of break that down. Now take that back to their time. How many different varieties of people you think really were involved into the arts as such, right? And had exposure to the arts and had the ability to practice the arts, so that they had so many of these diverse styles. Because if you keep in mind, let's think about this, right? If you're creating a fighting style that's different from this other style of fighting, right? That means you're creating something that you think is going to be unique to practice, to do, to develop, so forth and so on, right? So if that's the case for this style here and this style here, as you're developing styles, there's going to come to a point where they're going to have so many styles that are going to mesh, and everybody's going to start to look and take things from each other. But at some point in time, it's going to be where you're still going to have, I see that style there, I see that style here, I see that here. And as you talk about it nowadays, when you have people that fight, people, say mixed martial arts if you want, they pick and choose what they like and what they don't like, and now the styles are all amalgamated. When you're looking at what I guess express for Tai Chi, I try to be a purist and say, well, my stuff, even though it may look like this, I can show you a direct line from Dalu from this. I can show you a direct kind of relation to this particular posture in this form movement, right? And being able to show that direct link. But now I'm able to take that same stuff that was, practiced way back then, where they maybe didn't see somebody who was used to going to the ground. Are you seeing someone that's doing savate? It's like you have these long, sharp kicks, and you have, all these different variety of styles over the course of 100 of years that's grown. That means you're going to have to take your same style and adapt to the way people move their bodies and the way that people understand how to move their bodies. And my point being with MMA, and from the 90s, is that even in the practice of those arts, people have learned and understood more about their bodies through the practice of things. Now think about that same token about how many people have gotten involved into yoga from that time frame as well, because it's a big cultural shift as to what people are doing within themselves, right? So if you take that in consideration, when you're looking at how people start to get more informed about how to move their body and how to do things, you also can't stay stagnant in the way that you move and the way that you do things, and particularly if you're looking at it from a martial arts perspective, right? But even as a person, trying to stay not necessarily up with the Joneses, but in a way, in my body, I'm trying to stay. I'm trying to keep my body as active and as functional as it was 10, 15 years ago. so that means I'm going to always constantly have to learn more and understand more, and also be able to willing to accept other things outside of my knowledge realm, outside of my art, even to understand it. Like, oh, that's that. How does that relate? Oh, it doesn't contradict anything that I'm doing. It kind of supplements it because it's based on the same thing I'm doing in my art itself. I just never had maybe even that understanding or that exposure.
Let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
I believe I heard maybe you started when you were 25 in Tai Chi.
Yes.
That sounds about right.
Uh-huh.
What got you started?
Well,
what was the motivation?
There's an old school motivation and a one modern and current to that time frame, right? So the old school motivation was the Shaw Brothers films back in the 70s, and I wanted to only learn a Chinese martial arts. And I had around me, I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina, so it was a bit military town. So they had like some other Asian representation there. So they had like Taekwondo there. They had different varieties of karate there. But because of the movies, I was so engaged in learning and so intent on learning Chinese martial arts, like I saw in the movies, right? And that didn't happen. That didn't happen until I was in England, and I had this book on Chinese on martial arts actually. And I still have it to this day, on martial arts, and it talks about all different styles of martial art. And Tai Chi was one of those in the book. And I remember reading it and getting a rough idea of what it was about. It talks it up very big as being like one of those elusive type of martial arts that takes a long time to learn and master. And they had a little bit of I'll probably go grab it in a little while, but anyway, so I was like, oh, cool. Then I saw a little tag when we were downtown in Harrogate, England, on a person teaching Tai Chi. And I was like, hey, that's like in a book I was reading, huh? And so my ex-wife and I took a tab. We called the guy up. And I went to his class. He did a little kind of demonstration on me, a little push, and I go backwards, like, what the heck just happened type thing. And then I started. That was my Tai Chi journey starting right there. And he wasn't a Tai Chi martial artist per se. I learned so much from, his name was Bob France, from him in Qigong practice, and also the Yang style. We were doing Chin and Ching and also the traditional Yang style. He also taught me a Yang broadsword form as well. But his teaching was very, very detailed, very kind of, the small amount of movements as possible and get it right, then we'll move on to the next one. So we don't have to go back and try to fix anything. So going back to something that was mentioned about the square shoulders, that was part of like, hey, making sure your shoulder, here, don't drop your shoulder fat, don't lean. All of this stuff was, all right, when you get that, then we'll start going into your next movement. All right. So I remember my first 2 classes were an hour and a half, and all we did was like step open and raise arms. All right, go back to the beginning, step open, and that was an hour and a half, each time around. Then I got the hold the ball posture, I guess, if you will. Right. So, so that was my journey. And then eventually I told him I was in the book I have. I also saw a martial art called Bagua that I want to learn one day. And he goes, oh, I have a friend of mine that teaches Bagua. And then he introduced us and put us together based on my interest in Bagua. But he asked me, hey, how's your Tai Chi looking? And I said, how's your Tai Chi look? And then so I did a demonstration of my Tai Chi. And he says, in the literal words, your Tai Chi sucks. I'm not teaching no Bagua until your Tai Chi gets any better, till you learn better Tai Chi. So he started teaching me Tai Chi as well. And so I did an interview. It's on my channel as well. If you guys are interested, I can send you. Definitely want to see the Pushing Hands link, but I'll see links to this as well. I did an interview with him not too long ago, and he was talking about his history of things. This was David Nicholson, and his pathway and what my lineage is, and all the things that he learned and who he learned from, who was eventually passed on to me. Some of the people I practiced with as well, but. So he was the one to kind of like mold me more in the, one of the martial aspect, but they both brought so much to the table on both sides of the table, I guess you want to say, within the practice of Qigong and Tai Chi. Dave and I were really kind of, hell bent on proving Tai Chi as a practical martial art. Bob was more so in the vein of doing, a lot of healing practice. He was doing things with Reiki. And he's still out in Thailand now he's a Reiki master and things like that. And he uses Qigong practice as a way of for health. And he would do certain things like off the cuff in class. But I remember 2 ladies coming to one of the classes, and he was asking, he always asked, hey, how everyone doing today? And they're older ladies, they were like, oh, well, I have a headache this way, feeling like this, that, and the third. And then the other ladies, yeah, I was having a little bit of pain too, and I think it's like, and so we'll go into start the class, and we're doing some Qigong practice, and we're doing breath practice, we're doing different postures, different kind of like little sets of routines, triple heater, all this stuff like that, right? So he's just going on about his business and describing it, and then he's having little casual conversation. He goes, "Oh, ladies, by the way, how are your headaches?" And you're like, "Oh, they're gone." All right. So he goes, "So what I did was this practice we did here, rubbing their nose here and opening things, and then doing this breath practice that helps with with headaches and things." So he would do stuff like that all the time. Just kind of just not try to bring a heavy attention to it initially, but just would do practices based on how everyone or the energy was feeling in the room. And then he would teach sets. I would go around with him. We would see Bruce Francis seminars on Qigong and stuff like that. And this guy back in the day by the name of Michael Shea that was kind of really well known in the UK, because I was in the UK at the time. And all this stuff that I was gathering from both of these people is what eventually let me propel in Tai Chi as being a purist, because all the stuff that eventually started being able to functional things that I could start doing. And I was like, oh man, this stuff really does work, right? So I've never been a unhealthy person. So I never speak really a lot on health topics, but I do practice this with folks who have health issues, and I let them give their own testimonials, based on, what it does for them in that aspect. Because the funniest thing about the way I teach whether you're in it for the martial arts or not, as a martial art. And it's a weird way of saying it. But what I mean by that, I drill my students to death. I have I have my seniors. One of our drills is just getting up out of the chair. So you put your hands in front of you like you like to hold onto a pole. And I want you to launch yourself up, but I want you not to lean forward, to bring your weight forward. I want you to be able to have your feet, so you're sitting in the middle of the chair, your feet are flat, your feet are not tucked back. So your shins are perpendicular to the floor. Your back is relaxed, but it's not relaxing on the back of the chair because you're not, close enough in the back to get there. So I'm making you be in your legs. I'm making you kind of stay in your legs, but we're going to drill you standing up. And now once we do that enough times, now we're going to use that same way of you sinking your hips down like you're going to sit on the chair. That's going to be your posture. Now, I want you to be able to feel your weight in your legs now as you move. So now you got that support that you've already been building up for just staying up in a chair. So it was like the old school kind of training drills just to get folks just to do, the things that's tied to the practice,
So in regard to Tai Chi as a form of self-defense, so not coming from a fighter's perspective,
Sure.
Someone is looking for a self-defense system. What would you have to offer them in regards to that?
What do I have to offer them? I'll probably to offer them the same thing I would do if somebody's going to be sports fighting. Or the same as those who are coming to me for the doctor told them to come for good rehab for them. I teach it the same. I don't really kind of change. I teach at university, right? I teach for the kinesiology program here at one of the universities, and I have students in my class from all walks. From they're on the swim team, they're on the basketball team, they're 3D programmers, whatever, right? So I teach them all the same, but we practice all the same drills, all the same kind of applications that we would do a lot of partner work so you understand balance. And then I'll tell them how it relates to anything, other things that they're doing. Teaching him how to do white crane spreads his wings. And we're doing the 24 form, right? And so I was showing him how to bring in your back foot, and you're going to the movement. Your back foot's going to step up, and you're going to go down with your hand like this, to hold the ball. And then as you're bringing your wrist up, you're shifting your weight to your back leg. So it's coming up here, and this, right? So I said, but in my example, after we did the drill over and over, I said, one of the things I said, hey, it's like digging a shovel in the ground. You go, you step down, you drive your weight. When you come from here, it's like driving your weight down, dropping your weight down, and basically digging the shovel in the ground. And now you're not going to just pull the shovel out. You're going to lift it up, throw it over your shoulder. You're going to dig down, lift over your shoulder, dig down. And so he ends up telling me, hey, that drill you told us about? And I did try that. And he goes, I was out there in my yard. I had to make something. I was putting in the backyard. He goes, I was there for 6 hours using that technique you showed me. So it's like, okay, George. So my point being is that I don't really change. Obviously, I give a martial perspective and a fighting perspective about alertness, but I do that in my classes anyway. I literally have a drill beginning of my class. I usually try to get the biggest guy in my classroom to do it, and I'm in what we call the ballet studio at my university, is where I teach, because it's a big open hall. And I'll usually get a person. I'll say, all right, what I'm going to do, I want you to get behind me, and I want you to push me as hard as you can and I want to show you a thing about balance, I guess, if you want to call it, right? And then what I'll do is I'll get in front of the person and I'll cross my arms in front of me. And first thing I'll do is I'll look down. I'll put my head down like this, right? So with my head down like this, they'll push me. Usually the first time they push, they're a little bit apprehensive, so it's not very hard. I said, no, give it all you got. So when they push me, because my head is down, my body automatically goes a downward angle, right? Because my head is pointing down, my head is going to lead where I'm going, right? So, and usually I catch myself with the hands and you hear a few ahs because it goes really hard. And then I'll get back up and I'll do it again. Except for this time, I'm going to take my chin, I'm going to lift it up like such, right? And I'm going to have them push me again. And so when they push me, obviously my chest goes forward and then my head casts down, right? Because my head is back. It's going to kind of keep it in that direction. Then the third time, I will stand in front of them and I will look, just my head, everything's on the peripheral, my chin is balanced, tucked in like it's supposed to, all the postures all the same up here, nice convex chest and around back and things. And then I'll get pushed and they watch me skip across the floor, right? And they're like, oh, whoa, what? And then I say, okay, that's cool, right? Yep. All right, now you guys are going to do it. Because whatever I do, I want to show them that they can do it too as well, right? And then what it represents, right? And that becomes, now this is how you see things out on your periphery. You're looking down, you're missing everything that's coming above you, not aware of your surroundings at all. You're up here with your eyes, you're aloof to everything that's down here, but you're here, you can see everything in front of you and off on your peripheral and equally above and below you. So that grows a sense of alertness, right? This is the way you carry yourself. And now if you're going to be in a self-defense environment, you want to have your eyes so you can see what's all around. You can engage with things. Sometimes just giving somebody a look shows them that you're alert or you're aware or you see their presence that makes you less of a prey. You know what I mean? So that takes away that whole kind of surprise because you're engaging with your eyes. You're checking out, seeing what's going on. That person's looking, that person's paying attention, if you will. And that's one of the key things in self-defense, if you will, right? Martial application, that's totally different because then you got to take in, again, like I mentioned earlier, about statures, how tall someone is, how big someone is. And the key thing you have to take in is the mindset. I always tell folks, particularly if they want to learn self-defense from me, is that you got to have the same mindset or the same energy on saving your life as the person who is attacking, right? So any timid energy is not going to work. But it doesn't mean you naturally is going to have it. When that intensity happens, the level of understanding about fighting and being calm, like you say, I seem relaxed when I'm doing things, is a sense of confidence about self. So a lot of it is the mindset about having confidence about what you can do and what you can't do. I have a reality check on that, right? It might not be best for me to try to wrestle this person down because once scoop over and they're on top of me, I'm done, right? Or maybe, oh man, this dude is so clumsy. He's big. I'm going to choke him out easily. Let me get this big dude down. He can't do anything. He can't even get himself back up. So, you know what I mean? So it's like really having those understandings from within your mind of what's capable, right? And that goes on both sides. What's capable for another person and what's capable for you. Techniques and all those things are great and they're good. Just going back to the artist analogy, they're great skill sets and tools to have. Like, oh, look, I have a Chinese feather brush. Oh, I have this charcoal over here. You have all these kind of ways of crafting out your art, right? Some people are better at, different mediums than others, right? But if you have all these tools in your art box, you may do a portrait today or you may do an oil painting tomorrow. What's necessary? What's necessary for the job? Who's commissioning to do something? I want you to commission me a oil painting portrait. That may be totally different when someone says, hey, yeah, I need a logo, a two-color logo. You know what I mean? So different skill set, different kind of tools are needed, if that makes sense, right? So in self-defense, it's the same thing, right? You have to really, and this is what's helpful about Tai Chi and understanding the principles of the body, is because you can express to someone what they need to do with their body in alignment to principle, okay? That's the reason why you have the Yang Lu Chans, you have the Wu style, the Hao style, the Sun style. Even then when you get into the different lineages within the Yang style or the Chen style, there's different kind of way that people may do their thing within their practice because they have different attributes and they have different body types and things like that. So you're going to have to really connect with that when you're trying to teach with people, you know, and when you're trying to learn also, you also have to take into consideration, you know. One of my things my teacher Dave would always tell us, like, hey, don't ever think I'm trying to make a carbon copy of myself for you guys, right? You're not going to be a carbon copy of me, because some of the stuff I've learned you've never even been exposed to, right? And my body type is different and so forth and so on. So, you know, and I've been into fights and things like that. So it changes. You know what I mean? You can't expect that from people. So you have to have that understanding when you're teaching self-defense, for sure.
Did you say teaching self-defense versus Tai Chi applications is a difference? Or similarity?
No, I think one expounds from the other, right? So imagine this, right? So if I'm saying, so you give me a form movement. Give me a form movement, man.
Single whip.
All right, so single whip. For me, single whip, right? Depending on what's coming my way, right? I'm just here, not talking talking to someone, and then something comes my way. I happen to catch it. I'm going to use my shoulder. Whoa! And I may catch the wrist here, right? So I catch it. I'm holding his wrist tight. So I may be here. Now I'm going to use his hand. I'm going to come out. I'm going to split them apart with that. Only because at that moment in time, I didn't have my hands up for a guard, right? So now if I'm fighting with someone and we're in a ring and I know the single whip posture, I may do the same thing. Except for this time, as the hand comes in, I have my guard up. I may scoop my hand on the outside, lap over the top, and now my single whip is there, right? So what's changed is, again, I have to use my mind to say, wait a minute, this is the same position. Now I'm using my shoulder to bump that hand out here so this can catch it now, so it doesn't come back. Here, I'm like, oh, I'm on the outside of that hand, and now I'm going to go over the top to catch it. I'm going to do this here. And at the same time, what I'm also thinking about is that I'm making sure I take their center away from me, right? In both aspects, I'm taking their center away from me, because if this is their right hand coming at me, this is my right hand, I'm pulling them across this way with my single whip and coming in, all right? With my shoulder that's coming in, I'm bouncing that center over that way, and I'm going to catch that arm on the out so I could do something with it, if that makes sense. So
in a self-defense kind of teaching, I mean, they're looking for, okay, if I punch you this way, how are you going to apply that single whip? Or if I'm coming at you with a choke, you know, how are you going to apply single whip? Would that be different from teaching a fighting technique?
Not necessarily, but you know, we're going into scenario based, right? So you're talking about two different lines in one way about the way people apply their body mechanics, right? So if you're in a ring, you're expecting the other person to have some kind of good understanding of how to move their body into advantageous positions, right? And also how to maintain distance and understanding a sense of control, either in the environment or the other person, right? Control where you want them to go and things like that, right? So you may find that person out there in a self-defense situation, but more likely than not, you're going to find a lot more people that don't have that kind of understanding. They have maybe raw talent and moving their bodies in whatever aspect that they can move it, but don't have a really true understanding of body mechanics in that regard, right? So if that's the case, when you're in a self-defense environment, that means there's a lot more unpredictability, right? In that environment versus in the fighting realm environment, right? Because, you know, there's gonna be some things that's gonna be unpredictable. So elite fighters can throw some things and they're like, whoa, where'd that come from? But generally speaking, you know what to kind of expect. That's my point. In a self-defense environment, you don't know necessarily what to expect, but you do know your tools that you have in your toolbox, in your art case, right? And so what you have to look at is, like, based on this situation, they're coming to grab me. If I have time, I'm going to move them away, or I'm going to let them grab me so then I can take advantage of their elbows. Now I have them locked in here. So which one is going to be the best for the scenario I'm in, right? Because, you know, you may want to, or either way, you may catch them and do something in that way and they still come back. You may not catch them and it was too late, and then now you have to do something in that regard, right? Or again, my other scenario that I said earlier, you may catch them at the beginning before they get to you and do something and take them away. You may in your mind, like I said before, allow them to come in so you can do something as they come in. The variations are kind of endless, right? So how do you teach endless things? You have to give folks the sense of being creative with the principles of the art, right? You can give these applications as ideas and concepts to put into play, but look how many things are happening. And the reason why I mentioned about the shoulder, right? So the reason why I'm saying the shoulder to catch the single whip, right? So if I go back to the start of the position, typically in the form, it's back here, right? And then the shoulder comes, right? So why not go back in? If I'm going to go back in that position, why not I just go ahead and put my shoulder back in that position? But look what's happening when that shoulder moves, okay? So, or because I'm here, only this part of my body, my right hand, needs to go into position where I'm sinking down in the front and going back into position, right? So it's really determining how you want to use your body and then creating scenarios, as many scenarios as you can for practice, but you're still going to come to something unique at any point in time, because the uniqueness may be even just on this type of surface that you're standing on. It could be how close you are to a railing or something like that. You know what I mean? How secure is the platform you're staying on? So, you know, we're always training, you know, some percentage of the ideal situation for us, right? So we're never prepared in the very worst case scenario of everything that could be there, right? So, you know, you only could do so much with it, but always try to stay focused on being in principle of what it takes for you to be empowered during your engagement, you know?
A couple years, not even a couple years ago, a year or so ago, I was quite active in the fighting world, learning about bare knuckle fighting, you know,
Yeah, yeah, Marcus.
and yeah, working with Marcus, right?
Mhm.
So in that world, you know, we did a lot of combination practice, so
Mm-hmm.
throwing 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. So in your preparation for a fight, would you train in that regard, like hitting pads and training certain combinations?
Let me see. Let me go back to the 90s when I was doing, you know, my fighting and everything, right? So we did some pad work, not a lot of pad work. We did some pad work to just be familiar, one, with in your vein of questioning the idea of combinations. You know what I mean? Because also keep in mind I was doing pro sanda as well, so we could do takedown
Right.
sweeps and things like that, right? Um, movements have a combo, right? So if I'm doing brush knee and push, this may be a parry, right? And then parry, strike, right? And then I want to go back to grab into a play the lute. So that right there is a combination. You get what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
so, you know, and it may be, like I said, when I go to single whip, right? To, I can go from here, because I got their arm, sorry, here, so you can see my hand. I have their arm. If I have their arm, it's not a problem for me to now take my palm to go behind that shoulder where I'm kind of stopped right here. So this is their arm, and maybe I'm popping right on the front of their shoulder. For me to take my hand to scoop that behind that shoulder and then pull them in so that I can scoop my hand underneath the arm for arm drag, and then I'm doing white crane spreads his wings. Or I can do wild horses parts his mane from there. You know what I mean? So, or ward off from there. You know, so, you know, they're all there. And pushing hands is where I get those combinations from. Sorry about that. So pushing hands for me is that tool that I use to work on my combinations.
This is your foundation for teaching fighting, or for you to learn better fighting?
Yeah, it's actually my foundation for learning fighting from a Tai Chi perspective, for sure. You know, I do teach people, and so I'll say this, right? I've trained with folks who've been doing Tai Chi for, you know, over a decade sometimes. That didn't necessarily know how to punch, because, you know, we got a lot of open palm things in here, and maybe have like one punch down. You know what I mean? It's like there are not a lot of punches where there's this closed fist in the form, right? And I've seen people, you know, with their thumb on top up here type thing, right? You know, so I think when I take my hands and I go into a pushing hands environment, I start to turn people on to like, so if I'm here, say my hand's on the outside and this hand's on the inside, right? So if I'm on the outside here, I may scoop this down. When I scoop down, I'm thinking about, I'm gonna close, hand relax, close my fist when I get there, right? And then they're gonna try to draw back in to get to their hand. You're gonna bring it back so that you're following their flow so that you can scoop them out over here. So now I may take this to a chop or I may take this to a side fist, right? So I'm saying all this just so that you kind of get an understanding that with pushing hands is already kind of there, just turning on your intent of what you're doing with your palms, right? You know, and it's not deviating from the way that you still have to be sensitive, because it's not just I'm hardened, it's trying to get in there and strike. I want to play with your arms here a little bit so I can feel where you're the weakest. I can pull you right into something. I'm not actually just throwing my arm in there. I'm pulling you into this. You're sinking into it yourself for me. So, you know, you're doing, you know, more than half the work, if you will, right? But all that comes from pushing hands. And as I was talking about that the guy was the Chinese fellow that was practicing with my classmates, just watching the way that, you know, he would, sometimes these didn't matter at all until they needed to matter, right? Until they did, right? So he's like, over here on elbow, over here elbow. And then out of nowhere, bang, this hand comes out of there, right? It's like, wait a minute, where's it? And so I've adapted that very well. I mean, I became very, very astute in that kind of practice. And so being aware of that, understanding that's how you get to someone's body. That's how you defend from something that's coming your way. That's how you kind of stay engaged in contact with people, right? But then going back to more of just the understanding of Tai Chi practice. If you, like I mentioned earlier, talking about closing my eyes and feeling was there, staying, you know, fluid in motion and from the center, or sometimes the arms do need to move without the center so they don't compromise the center, right? So, because, you know, if someone has a good control of your center through your arm, well, no, my arms are no longer connected to that, all right? So they're gone. So, you know, that's there. But then you, again, because your sensibilities are well enough, you know when to return it back in an advantageous position so that you're, you know, you're taking advantage of that emptiness, if you will, that true exchange from yin and yang.
On the street, there's no rules. And in most fighting disciplines, in the ring, there's always rules.
Sure.
Do you feel Tai Chi is more efficient without rules?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
think in reality, it's like this, right? So if you can do it in reality, you can do it in the ring and vice versa. Okay. I don't think there's a true separation. I think when you're fighting in the ring, it requires for more accuracy, detail, and timing that will be extremely more beneficial to you outside in the street than just raw aggression or response to something. I'm saying Tai Chi being a raw aggressive art, but I'm saying thinking that, all right, I have a limitation of rules. You know, beating in a ring. When you're fighting in a ring, you're not necessarily thinking about the rules. Be honest, you're not necessarily thinking about the rules. I know from my experience and the people that I've trained with, you're not thinking about the rules. That's why the ref is there to make sure that you're following the rules. That's good. What you are relying on are your skill sets and your observation of what's happening within the other person, right? So your key element that you can take from that is your astute observation in outside environments when you're outside of the ring, right? So understanding detail, watching how a person stands. Although he won't have no power, they try to get to me from there. I do that all the time. I'm just like in, I don't know, the park watching the kids play. If I can see somebody's statue, I'm looking like, oh, they're staying like that. No, they don't have no power in their legs coming at me. Like, so I'm looking, but I may be doing that even when I'm looking at my students. You know, like I have like students that, you know, like I said, the other athletics, right? And I'm like, oh man, the way he's standing or the way she's standing, oh, they can have no balance. Their structure's completely off, but they're super fit. But their body mechanics is not in alignment with that. So, and I know this because I know how people can propel and project into power positions, right? No matter what athletics it is, even in football, right? So I like to do some drills with my class or my students that are on the football team at the university sometimes. You know, like we have our, you know, little things with pushing hands that we do and stuff like that. And I always like to test myself on folks who have good groundedness, even some wrestlers as well, right? Because it helps inform me on my body and my skills. With all that being said, a trained fighter training to be able to observe all these different things from body mechanics, from timing, from distance, from from energy even, because you can recognize people's energy. I think it lends itself directly into being into street fighting, right? So I don't think there's an advantage of being a street fighter and not having the rule sets in play. I think a lot of times what you have that most people don't consideration is collateral damage in that environment of the real world, right? And I say that in lots of ways, because you may not you may not know where you find yourself when you're going to kind of get engaged with someone. It could be on a busy street, right? I had a scenario where someone was following us, and my first thing as this guy was following my other half, Maria, and we had our kids with us and things like that, right? So this guy was following us, and I was telling Maria, I said, no, it's okay. All right, we're coming to an intersection. So if he does anything right here, he's going into like a street full of cars coming. Boom, but I'm saying that, and that was all serious because we end up having to like really get engagement because other people know it too as well. So he was following us through, downtown type thing area. But anyway, we didn't know he was going to do something to us or to the kids. So we didn't want to, put anything, into chance. But I'm saying that to say that you never know where you find yourself out in that public. And you may have, just in that case, kids that are becoming more vulnerable. Now, what do you do? How do you still stay aware of them and not lose yourself into this situation that you have to kind of deal with, right? So that changes, and that also requires that you still have to be good with timing. You have to be very accurate, and then your body has to be conditioned. That's one thing about people don't consider about those who train in fighting as a career or a very glorified hobby they do on a regular basis, is that your body is constantly being trained in that kind of motion and alertness and response. Okay, as a practitioner of Tai Chi and self-defense, you may not find yourself being in too many self-defense interactions as much as a person who trains in fighting, to have your body to be able to respond, your body, your mind, and everything into a heightened level of response that you won't necessarily, have as a default as a fighter in the ring, because you're so used to having that in a calm sense way. That's what we talk about in Tai Chi, being calm and being relaxed in the moments of chaos, right? But most times in the moment of chaos, there is a heightened raise of like, oh, now I got to bring myself up to this level of engagement and get locked in and focused because now it's on, right? So if you're, just like I was telling you before, when I was a wooden man, I was so in my anxiety, I stayed in that state for a long time. It's no different than anything else. If you're in a fighting state, a lot of times you're in that state of awareness in the sense of calm all the time. But if you're practicing to be calm all the time with no sense of alertness, that's going to be your go-to response first. Relax. So, I got to get, because it's on now. It's on. I have to make that switch, So I don't have time to set up and let me bring my energy down. It's go time. So I hope that helps understand my perspective.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's not to disregard the other, because some people don't go and compete, right? Some people don't get into the ring. Some people use their martial art to that level to, stay engaged with being in self-defense. But I would assure you that a lot of those teachers who train to that level have a lot of scenario-based training that goes along with it, right? So they can give you that sense. And then one of the things, the first thing that I think that made me really kind of understand going into a competition was that, especially in that type of competition where there's like sanda and full contact, right? You're no longer fighting your classmates, a person who cares necessarily about your well-being a bit, where there's a person over here who doesn't care. And so that takes you closer to a real life scenario than it would be just training with your classmates all the time. You know what I mean? There's always a sense of like, hey, I got to be, so you're in a competition, your intent in this regard is to cause some kind of, hurt or discomfort or pain towards the other person to gain the conquest of the environment, right? So in practice and sparring, we're not really trying to do that. We're trying to control the situation, not necessarily the person, if that makes sense, right? You know, so we're leaning in a little bit to get them a little bit. Oh, okay, that's good enough. That's this, that. You know, so unless you can get out of that environment and be sure that you're aware of how you really would respond in that environment, I think fighting in the ring is close to that. But I don't think it's the only way to that. I guess if that makes sense.
Well, I was going to make a comment. My
Sure,
first
sure.
Tai Chi teacher, he said there are no pretty fights. That once you engage, it's not going to be textbook.
Sure, sure. I would agree with that. I mean, I think, how can I put it? I don't want people to think, I mean, I don't care what they think per se, but in this regard, I don't want them to go away with a perspective that I'm this bloodthirst, eager to fight type of person. I'm probably the most laid back person you'll find. However, I can hold my own when I get into environments, right? And I think this demeanor itself prevents a lot of that from happening in environments anyway. You know what I mean? You carry yourself with a sense of confidence, right? But that being said, right, I think you can make beauty out of the ugliness in it when you really kind of study, like, you know, the way people are understanding how to move their body to dissipate a situation, if you will, right? I'm not just talking about like a brutal punch to the face or anything just like that. There's sometimes beauty in movement. It's like, oh, yes, I see what he did there, and that was great. And then of course something maybe, you know, more a dynamic or more demolishing may follow up. But that first, sometimes that lead in, it's like, wow, that's crazy. So I'm not a big UFC watcher, but I do watch UFC. And I was invited to a neighbor's house to watch UFC with him. This first time, you know, we were watching the fight together. He's a diehard UFC fan. He's always teaching me about the different fighters and the records, their backstory and things like that. So he's informing me on them and everything like that. Because from the back in the early days, I used to watch it and follow it, and, you know, kind of dissipated over time. But one of the fights, I've been teaching some kids Singi, right? And so I've been teaching them Pichuan. So you have a movement where you here, boom, 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 sorry, here, bring your fist up, you know, sorry, here, and then you're coming over up, and then you're coming down the top. So this top hand comes down, and you pull down, and the back hand, you know, comes firing down the center, right? So in one of the fights, the guy caught the person was throwing a right hand. He took his left hand and he pulled it. He kind of put it down like this, and then came over with the right like that. And I was like, oh man, I said, this just like Pichuan. You know what I mean? So you know, I was seeing it in the environment. But what I'm saying in regards to it, right? You know, it's a brutal knockout. But the moment before that was the sweet, you know, nice looking, you know, Pichuan motion. Then the knockout came, of course, right? So, but there's beauty in that movement of him being able to articulate that exact principle of letting someone come in. It's like yield, you know, or roll back, you know, in Tai Chi form, rolling them back right into something, if you will, right? So it's devastating, it's brutal. The guy was out, like, oh man. But there's beauty in that aspect of it, if you will. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, family, as promised, like I said, Mike Graves is simply built like no other.
Oh man, I got this from a lot of people too as well. You know, I mean, I study a lot from others, you know, and make it, I guess, part of me. And pushing hands is one of the things. If anything, I always say this when people ask me about it. I look at pushing hands like reading a book. So every person is a different book. So when you read books, you get knowledge all the time, because every book may be different, you know, than what you read before. New information in there, information that you never had to involve you with yourself. Or you may be saying, oh, I see relations and correlations to this what I read before. You know what I mean? So pushing hands is like book knowledge, right? The more people you engage with pushing hands, the more knowledge you gain for yourself, right? So, you know, if you take that in perspective about anybody you engage with, right? And when I talk to people, I always say, hey, even the message I'm talking to you specifically on right now, it may be eardrop of someone else who actually needed the information more than you did and make more use of it than what I'm giving to you directly, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So, you know, that's it with anything you're engaged with, right? You don't know what's the permeations of the things are going to be until you can kind of engage with them to some way. So I think pushing hands has always been an outlet for me, and that's why it's so relevant in my practice of Tai Chi. And it's not the end all be all of my Tai Chi. I love it. I do it to I travel all the time. If I'm going to go anywhere, like if I was going for work or going just on vacation, a lot of times I'm always checking before I go, hey, who does Tai Chi and push hands right in this area. Yeah, I'm always kind of checking in on that, right? And because I see one is a good networking tool. It's a good way of engaging with people through the practice and everything like that, and then seeing what people's other influences, knowledge, and so forth and so on. But it also helps the art kind of keep growing and having these tentacles all over the place. You know what I mean? Because you push with someone, that word goes around. You can say, "Oh, I know that person. Oh, you know him too? Yeah, I push with them." Yeah. So within the community starts to grow. So anyway,
you said, how do people find you if they want to find you physically or virtually?
So I don't have a website. So I have to explain my nature real quick. I'm only really just started to lock into teaching students. What I typically would have before, what people will reach out to me and, hey, I know you Tai Chi, will you be willing to teach me, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times they've already had Tai Chi practice already under their belt somehow. So they're coming to me for some specific thing or to expound on their thing. So I never had a school. I had a school name, I had a school representation solely myself. And I've had ones and twos of people that trained, for a while under my belt. As of January, it was the first time I actually started doing a actual class for kids and fully immersing myself into that. And I've been teaching at university, but that's under the university's label, I guess, if you will, right?
So when you say kids, what do you mean when you say kids? How old?
Oh, shoot. Let's see here. I think from the age of 7 to 12, 13. Yeah, to 13.
Oh, wow. Lucky kids.
Wow.
Yeah, you need to tell them that. You need to tell them how lucky they are.
Yeah, lucky, man. I know. Trust me. I know they don't. I know they don't know.
They make light of the stuff they have to do. I told you I'm a traditionalist, so that a lot of stuff they're like, gosh, why do we have to do this? But to get back to your question, so I don't have a website, but I have all the social media accounts. I have on Facebook, I am Longfei Taijiquan Association of San Antonio. I'm also Mike Gray's Tai Chi. You'll see that for me on Facebook. Instagram is Tai Chi Chuan Mike Boogs. I know it's a little bit crazy one, but I also used to DJ as well back in the day. So I have those two things merged together. Those two creative arts intertwined. All right. And then let's see here. I'm on TikTok as Longfei on Tai Chi Chuan, as well as you can find me on YouTube under Longfei Tai Chi Chuan, but my name on YouTube is Low Kick Slick. And there's a mountain of videos up there for you guys to kind of enjoy, laugh at, learn from, whatever, it is, critique. It's out there, full exposure. There's no kind of true bells and whistles to it. It's pretty raw. Sometimes it's just training. Sometimes it's explaining aspects. Sometimes it's like live video footage from my classes. You see me how I do it. You know what I mean? So if there's mistakes or anything of that nature, fallacies, you'll see them. They're right there in front of you. I have nothing, to shy away from in my practice. So I try to keep it authentic as possible, and keep it practical as possible, and